I arrived just after the champagne had been poured, late enough to make an entrance early enough to be undeniable. The vineyard shimmered in that golden hour haze, tables draped in ivory linen, and guests floating between laughter and polished small talk. No one looked my way. That was expected. I wore black. Floor-length silk, no embellishments, no apology. Against the pastel swirl of bridesmaid dresses and blush centerpieces, I was a shadow they hadn't planned for. A week ago, my name vanished from the seating chart. The wedding planner's nervous voicemail blamed a last-minute adjustment. I knew better. Vernon Maven didn't do last minute. My father was the kind of man who edited family like a manuscript, cutting anything that didn't flatter the story he wanted told. I found my own chair. Far from the head table tucked near the catering tent, just close enough to hear the string quartet and watch them pretend I didn't exist. Brielle was radiant, of course. The same way she'd always been radiant when she broke things and got rescued when she failed things and got praised. Her husband looked at her like she was a promise. I looked at her like she was a lie no one else ever questioned. Then he stood. My father. A man made of crisp shirts and colder silences. He raised his glass and turned toward the crowd. To the daughter, he said, voice ringing with conviction, who never disappointed us. Laughter. Applause. A clinking of glasses so loud it seemed to rattle the oak beams above the dance floor. Brielle leaned into the attention like she'd been preparing for it all her life. I stood, slowly. Not because I wanted drama, but because silence deserves to be broken sometimes. You'll regret that toast, I said, eyes locked on his. Gasps fluttered like wings around the tables. I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached into my clutch and walked toward the DJ. My heels clicked like punctuation. Play this, I whispered, handing him the flash drive. He hesitated, then nodded. By the time I returned to my seat, the slideshow had already begun. The music cut. The screen lit up. And 30 minutes later, the vineyard was silent. That morning, while I stirred lukewarm coffee in a hotel room I'd paid for myself, a message lit up my phone. Hey, are you coming? Your name's not on the seating chart. Maybe it's a typo. It was from my cousin Lisette. Harmless, casual, like a mosquito bite I wouldn't feel until later. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then opened the digital copy of the seating plan Brielle had posted in her story days before. My name wasn't there either. I told myself it was a mistake, an oversight, something that would be fixed with a phone call or a quiet apology. But no one called. No one apologized. Just after noon, I left the hotel and walked the gravel path to the venue. The planner spotted me halfway up the hill. Her eyes flickered with recognition and something else. Panic, maybe. Ms. Maven, she said, stepping forward, voice low. I wasn't expecting... your father made some last-minute changes to the guest list. She didn't meet my eyes. I nodded once politely. It's fine, I said, though nothing about it was fine. I'm not here for a name card. She hesitated, then stepped aside. My mother hadn't called me in 3 weeks. Not since I asked her if there was a reason no one had mentioned the rehearsal dinner. She said it must have been an oversight. She said, don't read into things, Aurelia. But her voice was too bright. Forced. I recognized the tone. It was the one she used around people she no longer knew how to talk to. My father never replied at all. 3 emails, one with a note about a gift, one asking about a logistics issue with the estate, and one just checking in. All left unanswered. I stopped trying after that. And yet, I still booked the flight, still packed the dress, still showed up. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't about logistics or clerical errors. This was about choice, about allegiance, and they had made theirs. So when I walked past the seating chart, I didn't flinch. I didn't look for my name. I found my own chair, unmarked, unclaimed like me, and waited for the moment I'd chosen instead. Brielle was always the golden one. That was the unspoken rule. She had the kind of smile people forgave before she even apologized. She cried, prettily danced, confidently, failed quietly. The world bent around her softness. At school, teachers called her a bright spirit. At church, she was the girl who sang harmony and remembered birthdays. At home, she was the thread that held everything together until it frayed. I was the other one, the serious one. The girl who corrected grammar at dinner and won science fairs without needing help. I wasn't difficult. I was just hard to decorate. No one ever said it aloud, but I knew. You can't hang a medal on a fridge and expect it to warm a room. When Brielle totaled her car at 16, she sobbed in the driveway while our father rubbed her back and whispered, "It's just a car, sweetheart." The next week, there was a new one. Blue. Paid in full. She drove it to school like nothing had ever happened. The following spring, I won a national math competition. First place. They sent me a medal and an invitation to speak at a regional summit. I told my parents over dinner. My father nodded without looking up from his phone. My mother said, "That's nice, dear. Do you still need a ride tomorrow?" There was no applause, no toast, just an empty chair at the back of an auditorium the night I gave my speech. Even now, Brielle lives in a downtown condo her name is on, but her money didn't buy. The boutique she runs. My father's name sits quietly behind the LLC. She calls it hers because that's what she's always been allowed to do. Claim what others build and wear it like inheritance. I don't have a boutique. I have spreadsheets, long hours, and a one-bedroom apartment that creaks in winter. I have student loans and a toothbrush I bought with my own paycheck. And I have silence. A kind of silence that doesn't fill space, but erases it. It's the silence that first made me wonder if this was really just favoritism or if something deeper had been stolen from me without my consent. It came on a Tuesday 2 weeks before the wedding. I was working late finishing a report for a client with a tangled web of offshore assets. When the notification popped up FWD Trust Amendment Review, I almost deleted it. It looked like one of my father's mass forwards, the kind he used to send before we stopped speaking in full sentences. I opened it out of habit. There was no message, just a chain of replies between my father and a legal consultant discussing revisions to the CW Trust, the estate left by our grandfather, Clarence Whitlow. The attachments were cleanly labeled Amended Trust Agreement, 2019 Beneficiary Breakdown Asset Schedule. I opened the second one first. Brielle's name appeared at the top. Sole beneficiary, primary contact. All distributions routed through an entity I didn't recognize, Sundale Origins LLC. I looked again, searched for my own name. Nothing. I went back to the original trust agreement from years ago, stored in my own files. I remembered the meeting where we were both present, the lawyer's voice as he read, "To my granddaughters Brielle and Aurelia, I leave equal shares of my estate." Equal. That's what it said, what it always said. I read the amendment again. It referenced consolidated oversight and strategic delegation of funds. Legal phrases that to the average eye meant nothing. But I knew better. I ran the LLC's registration. Sundale Origins had been created exactly 1 month before Brielle's boutique opened. The initial funding matched the first draw from the trust almost to the dollar. The boutique that bore Brielle's name had been paid for with money meant for both of us. And the year that happened, 2019, was the year my name was quietly removed from the trust altogether. Not reduced, not delayed, erased. I stared at the screen for a long time, the cursor blinking, the silence around me thick and unmoving. It wasn't just favoritism, not anymore, it was theft. And the man who signed those documents, the one who stood at the center of every decision, was preparing to raise a glass at a wedding I was never supposed to attend. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my phone across the room or call anyone for validation. That wasn't how I processed things. Not anymore. Instead, I opened my laptop and began to build the case like I would for any client, line by line, ledger by ledger. Probate records were public. I found the original estate filings from our grandfather's will, every distribution, every amendment, every accounting note. I downloaded them all. Then I searched the business records for Sundale Origins, LLC. It had one listed manager, Vernon Maven. My father, not Brielle, not even jointly. The woman who signed for flower deliveries and posed behind the boutique's checkout counter didn't legally own a thing. She was the face. He was the hand in the pocket. The funding came in waves. I traced it from the CW Trust to Sundale Origins, and from there to a commercial lease downtown, renovations, inventory, payroll advances, all under a clause called Revocable Beneficiary Realignment, a phrase tucked into the 2019 amendment like a scalpel between the ribs. I found a second LLC, this one labeled Vermeira Holdings, also controlled by my father, marked as a capital bridge partner. My name appeared once in a transaction. From 4 years ago, an internal note said the funds had been repurposed toward shared family development objectives. I never approved that. I was never even asked. My inheritance, my half, had been siphoned into projects I'd never touched, signed off by people who stopped calling me family the moment I stopped being useful. It wasn't just that they chose Brielle. It was that they rewrote the story so I had never been part of it to begin with. And through it all, birthdays, holidays, I spent alone. They smiled at me like nothing had shifted. Like there wasn't ink drying on papers that carved me out of my own bloodline. I stared at the spreadsheet I had built, dozens of rows, each one, a quiet betrayal. The question wasn't whether I could prove it. I already had. The question was how I wanted the world to find out. The night before the wedding, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, the glow of the screen casting long shadows on the walls. I scrolled through everything I had: documents, registry filings, screenshots, emails, signatures, facts, numbers, intent. And then I opened a blank presentation and started building a narrative, not just for lawyers, for everyone. I booked a separate hotel room closer to the venue, under a different last name, just in case someone tried to turn me away. Then I called Marianne, a friend from grad school who now worked in event production. She didn't ask questions, just sent me a file to overwrite the DJ's reception highlights folder. I copied everything onto a flash drive the size of my thumb and slipped it into my clutch. I laid the black dress on the bed and stared at it. It wasn't somber, it was sharp, structured, a statement, not a costume. I wasn't mourning anything. I was preparing to be seen. At the venue, I walked in through the side gate, nodding at a waiter who barely glanced up. I didn't bother looking for my name on the seating chart. I already knew it wasn't there. I walked past my mother, talking to a florist, and past my father, checking his cufflinks beneath the string lights. Neither of them noticed. No one did. I found a seat near the back, not tucked away, but not centered either. From there, I could see the stage, the screen, the DJ. The music played, wine poured. Brielle laughed the way she always did when everything was hers. And I waited. Not out of politeness, not for effect. I waited because I wanted them to feel secure, celebrated, untouchable. That's the thing about timing. It's not just about when you act. It's about who they think you are right before you do. So when my father finally stood to toast the daughter who never disappointed us, I knew I'd chosen the perfect moment to press play. The screen behind the head table flickered once, then again. The DJ looked up from his laptop, confused, tapping a few keys. Then it began. At first, no one noticed. The room was still humming with laughter, glasses, clinking, cameras flashing. But as the slideshow continued, the noise thinned. Slide 1. Last Will and Testament of Clarence Whitlow. The original document dated and signed, bolded with one clean line. To my granddaughters, Aurelia and Brielle, I leave equal shares. Slide 2. The amended trust agreement, revised 2019. Legal jargon wrapped around one glaring omission: my name. Slide 3. Email threads between my father and the estate lawyer. One line underlined twice. Remove Aurelia M. entirely. Proceed quietly. Slide 4, a spreadsheet of trust disbursements. Transaction IDs traced to Sundale Origins, LLC. Lease payments. Inventory expenses. Boutique launch costs. All signed off by Vernon Mavan. A hush fell over the room. A ripple of confusion, and then realization. I watched as Brielle's expression cracked, first disbelief, then a flicker of fear. Her husband whispered something to her, but she didn't respond. My mother's hand gripped the table. My father stood up, sharp-voiced and red-faced. "Turn that off. This is out of context." The DJ, wide-eyed and frozen, looked to me. I gave a single nod, but it was too late. The truth was out and no one could unsee it. I stood slowly turned toward the guests and spoke clearly, not loud, but loud enough. "You toasted one daughter, just wanted you to meet the other." No one clapped. A few people looked away. Others stared straight at me, their faces unreadable. I didn't care. They weren't the point. I walked back to my chair and sat down. The music didn't return. No one stood to make the next speech. The air felt full, like it might split if anyone dared to speak. And just beyond the vineyard lights, the sky was already beginning to darken. No one made it to the cake. The music never came back. The officiant, a friend of the groom's family, left quietly, citing a sudden migraine. I watched him walk out with his note still tucked under his arm. The best man sat frozen, holding a champagne flute like it might explain something. It didn't. Guests moved in small, startled clusters, some whispering, some pretending not to look at the screen that still flickered at the edge of the tent. A few relatives glanced my way, half curious, half terrified, as if proximity might implicate them. Brielle disappeared. One moment she was standing, cheeks flushed and lip trembling, and the next she was gone. Someone said she'd locked herself in the bridal suite. Someone else said she was sobbing on the floor in a dress that cost more than my tuition. My father tried to corner the DJ, voice low but intense. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew that stance, one hand on his hip, the other slicing through the air. Control. He was trying to recapture something he'd already lost. My mother sat with her hands folded in her lap, eyes glassy. A fixed smile stretched across her face like old wallpaper. She didn't speak to me, didn't even look at me. I finished my glass of wine. Then I stood, gathered my clutch, and walked out through the same gate I'd come in. No one stopped me. I didn't take anything from the dessert table. I didn't turn back. Later that night in my hotel room, I let the silence settle for a while before checking my phone. One voicemail. No missed calls. I pressed play. "You humiliated this family. I hope it was worth it." It was my mother's voice. Flat, tired, stripped of pretense. She didn't say my name. I deleted the message without saving it. That evening hadn't been about vengeance. It wasn't about making them hurt. It was about forcing them to see the thing they'd spent years erasing, and now they would have to live with it in every family photo that would never be framed. 7 days later, I watched the sunrise from my apartment window while my attorney filed the motion. It wasn't dramatic, no courtrooms, no gavel slam, just an email with a stack of attachments quietly sent to probate court and trust oversight. The kind of thing people like my father assumed no one would ever challenge, especially not me. By the end of the week, the trustee Vernon Mavan was under official review for suspected misappropriation of trust assets. The boutique's accounts were frozen pending an audit. A letter of inquiry was sent to Sundale Origins, LLC, and a financial hold was placed on the CW Trust until full documentation could be reviewed. I didn't celebrate. I didn't open champagne or take victory laps. I just kept going. But the story didn't stay quiet. 2 days after the filing, a headline ran in a regional business digest, "Family Trust Under Scrutiny After Wedding Revelation." Someone had leaked the video, or maybe someone had recorded it. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. The story was out. A few blogs picked it up. A local news station requested comment. I declined. Brielle's Instagram went dark. No honeymoon photos. No wedding recap. just a slow slide into curated silence. I received a handful of messages, one from an uncle who said he had no idea, one from a college friend who wrote, "They're lucky you didn't bury them," and 3 missed calls from my mother. I didn't return them. Instead, I opened my laptop, logged into the court portal, and watched the case status change from received to under review. There was no joy in it. Just a long, steady breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. The kind of breath that didn't just fill your lungs, it made space in your chest again. And in that quiet legal clarity, I began to understand that exposing the truth hadn't been the final chapter. It was just the first time I'd told my story without asking anyone for permission. The dining table was small, just enough for 6, and every chair was filled by someone who had earned their place. No name cards, no head table, just laughter, slow conversation, and plates cleared without ceremony. It had been 6 months since the wedding. The trust case was still under review. My father had stepped down as trustee voluntarily, though I knew the language had been negotiated. Brielle had moved her business operations online. My mother had stopped calling altogether. I'd moved apartments, kept working, let the noise settle. The night air drifted through the open window, soft and unbothered. My friend Jules poured another round of wine, a dry red we'd picked up together from a weekend market in Sonoma. She held up her glass. To the daughter, she said, eyes locking with mine, who knew her worth. A few others murmured approval, smiling as they raised their glasses. I let the warmth rise in my chest before answering. And to those who learned, I said quietly that silence doesn't mean absence. The clink of glasses was gentle, nothing performative, just a shared breath among people who had no idea how long I'd been holding that toast inside. I didn't speak of the wedding that night, not directly. There was no need. The people at this table had shown up for me long before any headlines, before any court filings, before I had decided to stop apologizing for my own existence. I didn't regret that day in the vineyard. I regretted every moment before it when I made myself small to keep their comfort intact. Every time I told myself it wasn't the right time to speak, every time I smiled through being erased. The truth didn't make me bitter. It made me real. And as the conversation shifted to books and bad dates and someone's awkward landlord story, I let myself exhale. Not as the forgotten daughter, not as the ghost at the edge of someone else's celebration, but as the woman who finally remembered herself.